You're listening to A Slice of Therapy with me, Alun Parry. Now, when Stephen King's first novel, Carrie, was turned down, the publisher said, "We're not interested in science fiction that deals with negative utopias. They just do not sell." And of course, it sold over 1 million copies in the first year. And likewise, Harry Potter was turned down 15 times. Decca Records famously turned down a young guitar band because they said guitar bands are on the way out. And of course, that band turned out to be the Beatles. But rejection is a part of life. In all sorts of situations, we hear the word no. But what does no actually mean? In this episode, I want to actually break it down so you can translate the real meaning of the word no. Now, no is the word that is most simply used in order to deny a request. So, can I have a pay rise? No. Would you give me a lift into town? No. Would you help me with this campaign? No. Now, it seems strange, really, that people say no at all, given how joyful it can feel to contribute to the well-being of another person. Think of any time where you've done someone a good deed just because you felt like, just out the goodness of your heart. And if you think of that time, I guarantee it'll feel good. And so, given how good it feels, why would we ever say no, given that yes is so joyful? Then obviously I'd only say no if something got in the way of it. So what would get in the way of saying yes and would lead me to say no instead? Well, the answer to that is a really good reason. And that good reason is a need of mine. That when we say no, what's actually happening is that a need of ours is getting in the way. So if you were to ask me to go to a restaurant with you and I say no, it's not necessarily because I don't want to. It'll be because a need of mine is getting in the way of saying yes in that instance. So perhaps I'm tired and I have a need for some rest, or perhaps I've been surrounded by people all week and I've got a need for solitude. Or perhaps I'm worried about COVID and so I've got a need for safety. Whatever it is, the word no expresses a need that is getting in the way of yes. Now, this is good to know for 3 reasons. First of all, it helps us not to take no personally. After all, we can't really take it personally now we understand what no is, because it's about a need of theirs rather than something specifically about us. And secondly, it's good to know that the word no actually is full of needs, because it can actually open up some lovely win-win possibilities. If we were to explore the need behind the no, then maybe it becomes the start of a conversation rather than the end of one. So for instance, the example I gave before is that you invite me to a restaurant and I say no. But the reason I've said no is because I've got a need for safety, because of COVID. Now, if you were to hear the word no and just end the conversation and walk away, then we both end up with nothing. But when we explore no, when we learn that it's actually a need for safety that the word no is expressing, we can then find a way so we both have some company, but in a way that doesn't breach that need for safety. Maybe we go for a socially distanced walk in the park instead. And so, whereas that whole conversation would have ended, this knowledge that no actually contains needs that are getting in the way of yes allows us to just delve a little bit deeper and find out what those needs are. And then actually we both end up with a result which is better than simply walking away. The third reason why it's good to know this about the word no is because there's actually a real possibility for a lot of intimacy in the word no. There's even a school of thought that champions the big vulnerable ask. Now, a big vulnerable ask is where you ask for something that you genuinely want, but you expect that the other person will probably say no. But even though you expect them to say no, you ask for your big vulnerable ask anyway. Now that in itself is an act of intimacy. But let's say you're right and the word no comes back. Once we know that there are needs being expressed within that very small word, they can be explored and brought forth. So a big vulnerable ask not only puts your desires on the table, but it actually discovers what the other person's needs are as well, which led to them saying no. And so both partners in this conversation are now creating a lot of connection and a lot of intimacy between the two. So let's recap then. First, we saw how rejection is a common part of life. People say no all the time. Somebody said no to Stephen King and to Harry Potter and to the Beatles. But we learned what no really means. No is a shorthand way of expressing a need, but without actually giving us the information of what that need is. And so it's very common that we will make a request of somebody, a friend or a loved one or a colleague, and they will say no, or maybe even, somebody in the political world. If we're seeking social change, maybe we would make a request and hear the word no. And what we will do then is we will tend to end the conversation and think that's the end of it. But once you realise that there are needs being expressed, we can actually maybe explore, and it could be the actual beginning of a fresh, possibility-laden conversation instead. So we saw, didn't we, that I might not want to go to a restaurant because with COVID I have a need for safety. And so what happens then is it allows a different conversation to take place and we end up with a lovely win-win. So we saw that there were 3 reasons why it's good to know this. One is we realise that it's not a rejection of ourselves when somebody says no, but it's an expression of their needs. Secondly, it makes those win-wins possible that we just mentioned. And thirdly, if we are prepared to do that big vulnerable ask, it can actually create an awful lot of intimacy when the no comes. Because then you've got the fullness of your desire and you've got the fullness of the needs behind the no all out on the table together. And I wonder what juicy, intimate possibilities are available in that space. So that's the episode over, but let me tell you what's coming up at the Liverpool Psychotherapy practice. I've been working on a course now for quite some time. I'm really happy with it. And the course is called 9 Ways to Beat Depression. And if you want to find out more about that, that'll be coming up a little bit later in the year. All you need to do is go to asliceoftherapy.com/9 ways. So that's asliceoftherapy.com/9 ways. If you'd like to work with me directly, of course, you can do. I'm Alun Parry, and you can find out more at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. And subscribe to the podcast because it's completely free and it means you'll never miss an episode again. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.